The freight wagon driver looked at Lena Holloway like she was already dead. Girl, I'm telling you straight, that ranch will bury you faster than this cold will. Lena sat in the back of the wagon, one suitcase between her knees, a photograph of her father pressed inside her coat pocket, where her heartbeat kept it warm. Snow came down sideways across the Montana Valley, each gust sharp enough to draw blood if you turned your face wrong. She was 23 years old, weighed maybe 95 pounds with wet clothes on, and she had exactly nowhere else in the world to go. I heard you the first 2 times, Lena said, voice steady despite her whole body shaking. I'm getting off here anyway. The driver shook his head, pulled the wagon to a stop beside a fence line that disappeared into white nothing, and waited while she climbed down. Her boots hit frozen ground and pain shot through both feet. The leather had split open somewhere around mile 40. She'd wrapped them with strips torn from her only other dress, but Montana winter didn't care about makeshift repairs. Iron Creek Ranch is a quarter-mile that direction, the driver said, pointing toward what might have been a gate or might have been a snow-covered corpse for all Lena could tell. Wade Coulter's place. You know anything about him? I know he needs a housekeeper. The driver laughed, but it wasn't a kind sound. Lady, Wade Coulter don't need nothing from nobody. Man's been half dead inside since his wife passed 2 years back. Stopped talking to people. Stopped smiling. Hell, folks say he stopped feeling altogether. He leaned down from the wagon seat, eyes serious. They call him the Bear of Iron Creek. You understand what that means? Lena pulled her coat tighter, even though it didn't help anymore. The fabric was thin enough to see through in places. It means he's big and people are scared of him. It means he's mean as winter and twice as cold. Last man who crossed him ended up with both arms broken 4 places. The driver straightened. You sure about this? Lena picked up her suitcase. Inside was one change of clothes, a hairbrush with half the bristles missing, and a silver thimble that had belonged to her mother. Everything else she'd ever owned burned 3 days ago in the textile factory fire that killed her father. I'm sure. The wagon pulled away, wheels crunching through ice, and Lena stood alone in the storm. She'd never seen Montana before last week. Never seen any place west of Pennsylvania, really. Her whole life had been narrow streets and factory smoke, 12-hour shifts threading needles until her fingers bled, sleeping in a rented room so small you could touch both walls if you stretched. Then the fire came. She remembered standing outside while the building burned, watching windows explode from heat, hearing men scream from the upper floors where the exits had been locked to prevent theft. Someone said her father made it to a window on the 3rd floor, but the drop was too far. Someone else said he never made it out of the sewing room at all. The company refused to pay burial costs, said the workers were careless with lanterns, said it was their own fault. Lena spent 2 days trying to find his body in the wreckage. On the 3rd day, the landlord threw her belongings into the street for unpaid rent. A neighbor mentioned that Western territories needed workers, that ranches took in anyone willing to do hard labor for room and board. So Lena sold her mother's wedding ring for train fare and rode west until the money ran out. Now she was here, middle of nowhere, Montana, negative 15 degrees, walking toward a ranch owned by a man the freight driver compared to a wild animal. The wind hit her so hard she stumbled, her vision blurred. For a second, Lena thought about just lying down in the snow, about how easy it would be to close her eyes and let the cold finish what hunger had started weeks ago. Nobody would blame her. Nobody would even know. But then she thought about her father trapped in that factory, and how he probably wanted to give up too when the smoke got too thick, and how he didn't because giving up wasn't something their family did. Lena started walking. The ranch house appeared slowly through the storm, low and dark, built from rough timber, smoke rising thin from a stone chimney. Fences stretched away in both directions. Somewhere beyond the house, Lena heard cattle moving, their low sounds almost swallowed by wind. She made it to the porch and stood there a long moment, trying to stop shaking enough to knock properly. The door opened before she could. The man standing there was the biggest human being Lena had ever seen in her life. Wade Coulter filled the entire doorframe, 6'4" at least, shoulders broad enough to block out the light from inside, hands that looked like they could snap fence posts in half. He had dark hair going gray at the temples, a beard that hadn't been trimmed in months, and eyes that looked right through you like you weren't worth the effort of actually seeing. Those eyes moved over Lena slowly, her torn boots, her thin coat, her shaking hands that she couldn't quite hide. You lost? His voice was exactly what Lena expected, low, rough, with zero interest in the answer. No, sir. I'm here about the housekeeper position. Wade didn't move, didn't blink. Don't have a housekeeper position. The posting in Billings said, that posting's 4 months old, position's filled. It wasn't filled. Lena could see past him into the house, dust coating every surface, dishes piled in the corner, dirt tracked across floors that probably hadn't been swept since autumn. But she didn't argue. I can clean, cook, mend clothes, manage household accounts. Don't need any of that. I work for room and board. No wages required for the first 3 months. Something flickered across Wade's face. Not interest exactly. More like he'd finally registered that she was still standing there. You're too fragile for this place. The words landed flat and final. Dismissal wrapped in observation. Lena looked up at him. This giant man in his fortress house. This bear of a human who everyone feared, who lost his wife and decided to stop feeling anything ever again. And she was so tired of being told she was too small, too weak, too breakable. Tired of people looking at her like she was already a corpse. Tired of being hungry and cold and alone. Then feed me enough to survive it. Wade Coulter went completely still. For 5 full seconds, he just stared at her like she'd spoken a language he'd forgotten existed. His jaw worked. His eyes narrowed. Then he stepped back and pulled the door wider. Inside, before you freeze to death on my porch and I have to explain it to the sheriff. Lena's legs barely carried her over the threshold. The house was warmer than outside, but not by much. The fire in the main room burned low. More dust than Lena had initially seen, thick enough that footprints showed clearly on the floor. The furniture was good quality but uncared for, everything slightly wrong in the way houses get when nobody's really living in them, just existing. A girl appeared from the back hallway, maybe 16 years old, thin like Lena, but healthy thin, with the same dark hair as Wade and eyes that went wide the second she saw the half-frozen stranger dripping melted snow on the floor. Wade, who... Girl says she's a housekeeper. Wade moved past Lena without looking at her, heading toward the fireplace. Probably won't last a week, but she can try. The girl moved closer, taking in Lena's condition with the kind of quick assessment that said she knew what starving looked like. I'm Ellie, Wade's sister. She grabbed Lena's arm, gently, like she might break. Jesus, you're frozen solid. Come here, stand by the fire. Lena let herself be led to the fireplace. Heat hit her face, and her whole body started shaking worse. The kind of shaking that happens when you've been cold so long your muscles forget how to work properly. What's your name? Ellie asked. Lena Holloway. Where'd you come from? Pennsylvania, factory work. Ellie glanced at Wade, who was pouring whiskey into a tin cup, his back to both of them. Long way to travel for housekeeping. Factory burned. My father... Lena's voice caught. She swallowed hard. I didn't have anywhere else. The silence that followed felt heavy. Wade turned around, cup in his hand, and looked at Lena properly for the first time. Really looked at her. Not dismissively, not impatiently, but the way you look at something broken that might not be worth fixing. You eaten today? No, sir. Yesterday? Lena hesitated. Some. Wade made a sound low in his throat that might have been disgust or anger or both. Ellie, get her food, whatever we've got. He drank the whiskey in one swallow. I'm going to check the fence line before dark. She can stay the night, but if she's not useful by tomorrow, she's gone. He grabbed a heavy coat from a peg by the door and walked out into the storm without another word. Ellie watched him go, then turned to Lena with an apologetic smile. He's not as bad as he sounds. He sounds pretty bad. Yeah. Ellie moved toward what Lena assumed was the kitchen. But he used to be worse. After Sarah died, that was Wade's wife, he didn't talk for 3 months straight, just worked, drank, slept. The ranch hands thought he might actually lose his mind. She pulled out a chair at a rough wooden table. Sit, please, before you fall down. Lena sat. Her whole body felt wrong, too light and too heavy at the same time, like gravity couldn't decide what to do with her. The room tilted slightly. She gripped the table edge. How long you been traveling? Ellie asked from the kitchen area, her voice cutting through the fog in Lena's head. 6 days. Eating? When I could. Which was never, I'm guessing. Ellie returned with a plate, bread, cold meat, something that might have been stew from this morning. Here, eat slow or you'll get sick. Lena stared at the food. Her hands shook when she reached for it. The first bite of bread tasted so good it almost hurt. She tried to eat slowly like Ellie said, but her body had other ideas. 3 bites in and her stomach cramped so hard she had to stop. One hand pressed to her ribs, fighting not to vomit. "Breathe," Ellie said quietly, sitting across from her. "Just breathe. Your stomach's probably the size of a fist right now. It'll stretch again, but you gotta be patient." Lena nodded, eyes watering, waiting for the cramp to pass. "Why'd you really come here?" Ellie asked. "I mean, why this ranch specifically? Wade's name isn't exactly famous for hospitality." Lena took another careful bite of bread. Posting in Billings mentioned Iron Creek by name. Said the owner was a widower with a younger sister, needed help managing the household. She paused. It was the only posting that offered room and board without wages up front. Everything else wanted experience I don't have or money I definitely don't have. Ellie nodded slowly. "That posting's old. Wade put it up right after Sarah died when he thought maybe having someone around would help." Her voice dropped. "It didn't. First woman lasted 2 days before Wade's temper scared her off. Second one made it a week before she decided living alone in town was better than living here." "What happened to the third?" "There wasn't a third. Wade gave up trying." Lena ate another bite. The cramp was easing. Her body remembered how to process food, slowly. "What was she like?" "Sarah?" Ellie's face softened. "Kind. Really kind. The type of person who made you feel like you mattered just by talking to you." She traced a finger along the table grain. "She got sick during a fever outbreak 2 winters ago. Half the county caught it. Most people recovered. Sarah didn't." "I'm sorry." Wade was with her the whole time, 3 days of fever before she passed. He held her hand through all of it. Ellie looked toward the door where her brother had disappeared. When she died, something in him died too, the Sarah-shaped part. He just shut down. Lena understood that. When her father died, part of her shut down too. The part that believed anything good could last. They sat in silence while Lena finished eating, slower now, more careful. Outside, the storm continued hammering the valley. Wind rattled the windows. Snow piled higher against the walls. "Can I ask you something?" Ellie said. "Sure." "That thing you said to Wade, about feeding you enough to survive it." Ellie leaned forward. "Where'd that come from?" Lena set down the fork. "I spent 6 days walking through winter thinking I was going to die. Thinking maybe I should just lie down and let it happen." She met Ellie's eyes. "But I didn't. I kept walking. And when your brother looked at me like I was already gone, like I wasn't even worth the effort of telling no." She shrugged. "I guess I decided I was tired of people writing me off before I even tried." Ellie smiled, a real smile, the first genuinely warm thing Lena had seen since arriving. "I think you might actually make it here." "Your brother doesn't seem to think so. Wade doesn't think anything good can happen anymore. Proving him wrong would be the best thing that's happened to this house in 2 years. Later, after Ellie showed her to a small room off the kitchen that was freezing cold but had an actual bed. After Lena unpacked her single suitcase and realized how pathetic her belongings looked spread across the quilt, after she'd washed her face with water so cold it stung, Lena lay in the darkness and listened to the house settle around her. She could hear Ellie moving in the next room. Heard Wade return from checking the fences, his heavy boots on the porch. Heard low voices discussing something she couldn't make out. Then silence. Lena pulled the quilt tighter. Her body ached everywhere. Her feet throbbed where the boots had torn open. Her hands were cracked and bleeding from cold. Every breath hurt a little, but she was inside. She was warm. She'd eaten. For tonight, that was enough. She thought about her father and wondered if he'd be proud of her or ashamed that she'd run so far from home. Probably both. She thought about Wade Coulter and the way he'd looked at her, like she was a problem he didn't want to solve. She thought about Sarah, the dead wife whose absence filled this entire house like smoke. Then Lena closed her eyes and fell into the kind of sleep that happens when your body finally stops fighting and just surrenders. She dreamed about fire. Wade Coulter stood on his porch at dawn, coffee in one hand, watching gray light spread across the valley. He hadn't slept well. Kept thinking about the girl. That starving, half-frozen girl who showed up yesterday looking like a strong wind would snap her in half, but who somehow had the spine to look him in the eye and demand to be fed enough to survive. It bothered him. Not her presence exactly. The fact that her presence bothered him at all. Wade had spent 2 years carefully constructing a life where nothing bothered him, where nothing got in, where he did his work, drank his whiskey, slept when exhaustion forced it, and felt absolutely nothing about any of it. Sarah's death had taught him that feeling anything was just setting yourself up for more pain. Better to be numb, safer. But then this girl appeared, and something about her made him angry in a way he couldn't quite name. The door opened behind him. Ellie stepped out, wrapped in a heavy shawl, her breath fogging in the cold. "You're up early." "I'm always up early." "You're up earlier than usual." Ellie moved beside him, looking out at the same view he was pretending to care about. "You thinking about her?" Wade didn't answer. "She's still asleep," Ellie continued. "I checked on her an hour ago, dead to the world. I don't think she's really slept in days." "Not our problem." "You let her stay. For one night, like I said." "Wade." Ellie's voice got that edge it sometimes did, the one that meant she was about to say something he didn't want to hear. She walked through a blizzard with torn boots and no food because she had nowhere else to go. "You really gonna throw her back out?" "She's not my responsibility. She's a person who needs help." "A lot of people need help, can't save them all." "I'm not asking you to save them all. I'm asking you to let one girl stay in the spare room and help around the house." Ellie paused. "It's what Sarah would have done." Wade's jaw clenched. "Don't." "It's true." "I said don't." They stood in silence, tension hanging between them. Finally, Ellie sighed. "Fine. You're right. Not our problem." She turned to go back inside, then stopped. "But you know what I think? I think you're scared of her." Wade looked at his sister. "Scared of a 90-pound girl?" "Scared of caring about anyone again. Scared that if you let yourself feel something for one single person, all the stuff you've been burying for 2 years is going to come back and break you open." Ellie met his eyes. "So yeah, scared of a 90-pound girl." She went inside before Wade could respond. He stood there a while longer, drinking cold coffee, watching the sun fail to break through cloud cover. Then he went to the barn to check on the horses and pretend his sister hadn't just cut straight through to something he'd been avoiding looking at for 24 months. Lena woke to voices, men's voices, rough and loud and laughing about something. She sat up slowly, head pounding, body stiff. The room was freezing. Gray light came through the single small window. For a moment, she couldn't remember where she was. Then it came back. Montana. Iron Creek Ranch. Wade Coulter. She dressed quickly, the same clothes from yesterday since they were the only warm things she had. Her boots were still torn. She'd tried to stitch them last night with needle and thread from her suitcase, but the leather was too frozen to work properly. The voices got louder. Lena opened her door carefully and moved toward the main room. 3 men sat around the table, ranch hands by the look of them, rough and weathered, eating what might have been breakfast. Ellie stood by the stove, looking exhausted. Wade was nowhere in sight. One of the ranch hands noticed Lena first. "Well, hell, the charity case is still here." The other 2 turned to look. Lena stopped in the doorway. "I'm Lena, the new housekeeper." The first man laughed. "Housekeeper, right." He looked at his companions. "She gonna blow away before lunch or make it till dinner?" "I give her 3 days," another said. "Assuming Wade doesn't scare her off first." "I give her one. Look at her. Probably never worked a day in her life." Lena felt her face heat. Ellie intervened quickly. "Lena, this is Jack, Thomas, and Ray. They help run the ranch." She shot the men a look. "And they were just leaving to check the northern fence line." Jack, the one who'd spoken first, stood slowly. He was big, almost as big as Wade, with the kind of smile that wasn't friendly. "Relax, Ellie. We're just making conversation." He looked at Lena. "You really think you're going to make it here? I think I'll do my job and stay out of your way." "Good plan. But between you and me," he stepped closer, "this place eats girls like you for breakfast. Soft city types who don't know hard work from a hole in the ground. You'll be begging Wade for wagon fare back to wherever you came from before the week's out." Thomas laughed. "Assuming she survives that long." The third man, Ray, didn't laugh. He looked uncomfortable but didn't say anything to stop his friends. Lena stood very still. She'd dealt with men like this before. Factory foremen who thought young women were entertainment. Landlords who made comments about rent arrangements. Men who mistook silence for weakness. "Thank you for the advice," she said quietly. "I'll keep it in mind." Jack's smile widened. "You're polite too. That's cute." "Jack," Ellie's voice cut sharp. "Get out!" We're going. Jack grabbed his hat from the table. "Come on, boys. Let's leave the ladies to their housekeeping." The three men filed out, still laughing. The door closed behind them and Ellie immediately turned to Lena. "I'm sorry. They're assholes." "It's fine." "It's not fine. They've been working here since before Sarah died, and they think because Wade doesn't care about anything anymore, they can say whatever they want." Ellie grabbed a plate from the shelf. "You hungry?" "I can help cook." "You need to eat first." "I can do both." Ellie paused, then nodded. "Okay, there's eggs that need scrambling and bread that needs slicing. Can you handle a knife without cutting yourself?" "I worked in a textile factory for 7 years. I can handle a knife." They worked in silence for a while. Ellie frying salt pork, Lena scrambling eggs and slicing bread. The rhythm felt natural, familiar, like something Lena's body remembered even when her mind was exhausted. "Can I ask you something?" Lena said. "Sure. Why do they stay? If Wade's so hard to work for, why not find another ranch?" Ellie flipped the pork. "Because Wade pays better than anyone else in the county. Because he doesn't cheat them on wages. Because even when he's at his worst, he's still fair." She paused. "And because deep down, I think they're scared of him. Wade's not someone you cross. He seems angry, closed off, dead inside. Sad." Ellie looked at Lena, surprise clear on her face. "That's the first time anyone said that." "Well, it's true. I've seen angry men. Wade's not angry. He's just—" Lena searched for words. "Hollowed out." Ellie was quiet for a moment. "Sarah was the only person who ever really saw him," she said finally. "The only one who got past all the walls. When she died, the walls went back up, and Wade locked himself inside them." She slid the pork onto a plate. "I keep hoping someone or something will pull him back out. But it's been 2 years, and nothing's worked." They finished cooking and set the table. Wade came in a few minutes later, covered in snow, smelling like cold and horses, his expression unreadable as always. He looked at the table, looked at the food, looked at Lena. "You cooked this?" "Ellie and I both did." Wade sat down without comment and started eating. For a few minutes, nobody spoke. Then Wade said, still looking at his plate, "Fence lines damaged on the north side. Storm knocked down about 40 feet. I'll fix it this afternoon." "I can help," Ellie offered. "No, too cold. You stay inside." "Then Lena can help. Extra hands would make it faster." Wade finally looked up. His eyes landed on Lena, and she felt the weight of his assessment like something physical. "She'll freeze to death in 10 minutes. "I won't," Lena said. "You don't have proper clothes, proper boots, proper anything. I have 2 working hands and I follow instructions. That's enough." Wade's jaw worked. He looked like he wanted to argue, but couldn't figure out why he was bothering. "Fine. But if you slow me down, I'm leaving you out there." "Understood." After breakfast, while Wade gathered tools and Ellie found Lena warmer clothes that didn't quite fit, Lena stood in her small room and tried to remember the last time she'd felt this determined. Maybe never. Maybe that was the point. She'd spent her whole life being told she was too small, too weak, too fragile. Every man who looked at her saw breakable. Every boss who hired her expected her to fail. Even her father, who loved her more than anything, used to worry constantly that the world would crush her the moment he wasn't there to protect her. And maybe he'd been right. Maybe the world had crushed her. But she was still here, still standing, still walking toward the next impossible thing. That had to count for something. The fence line stretched across frozen ground like a scar. Wade worked in silence, pulling down damaged wire, resetting posts, his massive hands moving with the kind of efficiency that said he'd done this 10,000 times before. Lena stood nearby, holding tools when he needed them, fetching supplies when he asked, trying desperately not to let him see how much the cold was destroying her. Her feet were numb, her face burned, her hands, wrapped in borrowed gloves 3 sizes too big, could barely grip anything. But she didn't complain. Didn't ask to go back inside, just kept working. An hour in, Wade finally spoke. "Why are you really here?" Lena handed him wire cutters. "I told you, nowhere else to go." "There's always somewhere else. Towns need workers. Other ranches wanted experience or money up front. Towns wanted rent I couldn't pay." Lena paused. "Your posting said room and board, no wages required for 3 months. That was the only option I could afford." Wade cut through damaged wire with a sound like breaking bones. "You running from something?" "No." "Someone?" "No." "Then what?" Lena was quiet for a moment. "I'm running towards something." Wade looked at her properly, the first time he'd really looked at her since they'd started working. "Toward what?" "I don't know yet, but it's better than staying where I was." Wade went back to work. They finished the fence line as afternoon light started failing. By the time they walked back toward the ranch house, Lena's entire body was shaking so hard she could barely see straight. Wade noticed. "You're hypothermic." "I'm fine." "You're not fine. You're about 10 minutes from collapsing." "Then I'll collapse inside instead of out here." Something almost like amusement crossed Wade's face. Almost. They made it back and Lena went immediately to the fireplace, sitting so close the heat was nearly painful. Ellie brought her hot coffee. Wade disappeared to the barn. That night, Lena cooked dinner, stew from what she could find in the pantry, bread from flour that was almost too old to use. It wasn't fancy, but it was hot and filling. When Wade came in and sat down to eat, he took one bite, then another. Then he looked at Lena. "This is the best meal I've had in 6 months." Ellie laughed. "Wade, that's the saddest compliment I've ever heard." Wasn't meant as a compliment, just a fact. But after dinner, when Lena started washing dishes, Wade didn't disappear immediately like Ellie said he usually did. Instead, he sat by the fire with his whiskey, quiet, staring into the flames. And when Lena collapsed halfway through washing the second pot, not dramatically, not making a scene, just her legs giving out and her body folding into itself because hunger and cold and exhaustion finally won, Wade was the one who caught her before she hit the floor. He carried her to the couch, set her down carefully, looked at her like he was seeing something he'd been trying very hard not to see. "You weigh nothing." Lena tried to sit up. "I'm fine. I just—" "Stay there." It wasn't a request. Wade disappeared into the kitchen and returned with bread, meat, and cheese on a plate. "Eat." "I already ate at dinner." "You had 3 bites." "I counted." He set the plate on her lap. "Eat all of it." Lena stared at the food, then at Wade. "Why do you care?" "I don't." "Then why?" "Boy." "Because if you die on my property, I have to explain it to the sheriff." Wade stood, heading back toward the fireplace. "And I don't feel like dealing with that paperwork." It was the worst reason Lena had ever heard. But when she looked at Ellie, the younger girl was smiling. Later that night, after everyone had gone to bed, Lena lay in her freezing room and thought about the way Wade had caught her. Not roughly, not impatiently, carefully, like he'd remembered, just for a second, how to touch something fragile without breaking it. And outside, the storm continued, burying Montana under snow that wouldn't melt until spring. Lena learned the rhythm of Iron Creek Ranch the way you learn to breathe underwater, by nearly drowning first. She woke before dawn every morning to start the fire. Her hands were still cracked and bleeding from the cold, but they worked well enough to stack kindling and strike matches. By the time Wade came downstairs, coffee was ready. By the time Ellie emerged, breakfast was cooking. Nobody asked her to do this. Nobody thanked her for it either. But after 3 days, Lena noticed Wade stopped pouring his own coffee, just sat down at the table and waited for her to bring it to him. And when she set the cup beside his plate, he'd nod once, barely perceptible, more acknowledgement than gratitude. But it was something. The ranch hands were a different story. Jack kept making comments about how long she'd last. Thomas liked to leave muddy boots right where she'd just cleaned. Ray didn't say much, but he watched her constantly, like he was waiting for her to prove them all right by breaking. Lena ignored them. She'd dealt with worse men in the factory. Foremen who grabbed, supervisors who threatened, workers who thought a young woman alone was fair game for whatever they felt like saying. At least here, Wade's presence kept them from doing anything worse than talking. One morning, about a week after she'd arrived, Lena was hauling water from the pump when Jack appeared beside her. Need help with that? The bucket was heavy enough that her arms shook. I'm fine. You don't look fine. You look like you're about to drop it. Then I'll drop it and pick it back up. Jack laughed. You got some spine, I'll give you that. He leaned against the pump, blocking her path back to the house. But spine don't keep you warm at night, you know what I mean? Lena set the bucket down. I know exactly what you mean, and the answer is no before you even ask. I didn't ask anything. You were about to. Jack's smile faded. You think you're smart, don't you? Think because Wade let you stay that you're special somehow. He stepped closer. But you're not. You're just another mouth to feed, another problem. And when Wade gets tired of you, and he will, you're going to need friends around here. I'd rather have no friends than the kind you're offering. Jack's expression went cold. For a second, Lena thought he might actually grab her. His hand twitched, his jaw clenched. Then Wade's voice cut through the morning air like a blade. Jack, North Pasture. Now. Jack turned to find Wade standing on the porch, coffee cup in one hand, his eyes locked on the scene by the pump. We were just talking, boss. I don't pay you to talk. I pay you to work. North Pasture. Move. Jack shot Lena one last look, promising this wasn't over, then stalked off toward the barn. Wade waited until Jack was out of earshot before speaking again. He gives you trouble, you tell me. Lena picked up the bucket. I can handle it. That wasn't a request. I appreciate it, but I don't need protecting. Wade's eyes narrowed. What you need, and what I'm willing to tolerate on my property, are two different things. Jack steps out of line again. I want to know about it. He went back inside before Lena could argue further. She stood there a moment, bucket in hand, trying to decide if she should feel insulted or grateful. Eventually, she settled on both. Inside, Ellie was kneading bread dough with the kind of tired determination that said she'd been doing this alone for too long. Let me help, Lena said. You just carried water. Take a break. I'd rather work. Ellie looked at her for a long moment, then smiled slightly. You're the first person who's said that since Sarah died. They worked side by side, falling into an easy rhythm. Ellie shaped loaves while Lena cleaned the breakfast dishes. Outside, morning light struggled through cloud cover that promised more snow. Can I ask you something? Ellie said. Sure. Why do you work so hard? I mean, Wade already said you could stay. You don't have to prove anything. Lena dried a plate carefully, thinking about how to answer. My father used to say, idle hands make a restless mind. If you're always working, you don't have time to think about what you've lost. She set the plate on the shelf. I guess I got used to it. What did you lose? Everything, Lena thought, but she said, just my father. The factory fire. Ellie's face softened. I'm sorry? It's fine. It's not fine. Losing someone never is. They worked in silence after that. Later, while Lena was sweeping the main room, she found something tucked behind the bookshelf, a small wooden box, dusty and forgotten. Inside were letters tied with ribbon, a pressed flower, and a photograph of Wade standing beside a woman who had to be Sarah. Lena stared at the photograph. Sarah had been beautiful, dark hair, bright eyes, the kind of smile that made you want to smile back. And Wade in the picture looked like a completely different person. Younger, yes, but more than that. He looked alive, happy, the way people look when they haven't been hollowed out by grief yet. That was taken on their wedding day. Lena turned to find Ellie standing in the doorway. I'm sorry, I wasn't snooping. I just found It's okay, Wade keeps that box there on purpose. Says if he puts it away, he'll forget what she looked like. Ellie moved closer, looking at the photograph over Lena's shoulder. He used to look at her the way most people look at miracles, like he couldn't believe she was real. What happened? I mean, I know she got sick, but... Ellie sat down on the couch, her expression distant. Fever outbreak swept through the valley 2 winters ago. Started in town, spread to the ranches. Most people recovered after a few days. Sarah didn't. She paused. Wade brought in every doctor within 100 miles, tried every remedy anyone suggested, sat with her for 3 days straight while the fever burned through her. That's horrible. The worst part is, right before she died, she woke up, just for a few minutes, lucid, and she made Wade promise her something. What? That he'd keep living, that he wouldn't shut down, that he'd let himself be happy again someday. Ellie's voice got quiet. Wade told her yes, promised her. Then she closed her eyes and never woke up. Lena looked at the photograph again, at Wade's smile, at the way he stood beside Sarah like she was the only thing holding him upright. He didn't keep the promise. No, he didn't. The day after we buried Sarah, Wade stopped talking to people, stopped going to town, fired most of the ranch hands because he couldn't stand anyone being happy around him, just worked himself half to death every day and drank himself unconscious every night. Ellie met Lena's eyes. That's why I'm glad you're here. You're the first person since Sarah who's gotten him to act even remotely human. I don't think he's acting human because of me. I think he's just tolerating me until he finds a reason to make me leave. Maybe. But at least he's tolerating someone. That's more than he's done in 2 years. That afternoon, while Wade was out checking cattle and Ellie had gone to town with Ray to get supplies, Lena found herself alone in the house for the first time since arriving. She walked through the rooms slowly, seeing them properly now that panic and exhaustion weren't clouding everything. The house was well built but neglected. Good furniture covered in dust, windows that needed washing, floors that hadn't been properly scrubbed in months. The kind of decline that happens when people stop caring whether their surroundings reflect their lives. In Wade and Sarah's old bedroom, now just Wade's room, she supposed, Lena found more evidence of grief left untended. Sarah's clothes still hung in the wardrobe. Her hairbrush sat on the dresser, strands of dark hair still caught in the bristles. A book lay open on the bedside table, marking a page Sarah would never finish reading. Lena knew she shouldn't be in here, knew Wade would probably throw her off the ranch if he found out. But she couldn't help herself. She picked up the book carefully. It was a novel about a woman traveling west to start a new life. The irony wasn't lost on her. Looking for something? Lena spun around to find Wade standing in the doorway. He didn't look angry exactly, more like caught between anger and something else Lena couldn't name. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have. No, you shouldn't have. Wade stepped into the room, his presence filling the space in a way that made it hard to breathe. This room is off limits. I know, I was cleaning and I saw the door open and I thought, you thought you'd go through my dead wife's things? The words landed like a slap. Lena set the book down carefully. I wasn't going through anything. I was just looking. Same difference. It's not, actually. Looking means I was curious. Going through means I was searching for something. I wasn't searching. I was just... She trailed off, not sure how to explain. Wade moved to the dresser and picked up Sarah's hairbrush. He held it like something precious and dangerous at the same time. You want to know why I keep this room the way it was? You don't have to tell me. Because if I change it, it means she's really gone. If I put away her clothes and throw out her things and move on like everyone keeps telling me to, then what was the point? What was the point of loving her if I'm just supposed to forget and start over? Lena understood that logic. Broken logic, maybe, but she understood it. My father died in a factory fire, she said quietly. They wouldn't let me see his body, wouldn't let me bury him properly. The company just hauled away the remains and told us to be grateful they covered disposal costs. She paused. For 3 days, I kept expecting him to come home, kept setting a place for him at meals, kept thinking maybe they'd made a mistake and he'd walk through the door. Wade looked at her properly for the first time since entering the room. What made you stop? The landlord threw his clothes into the street when he evicted me. I saw them lying in the mud and I realized he really wasn't coming back, and holding on to empty spaces wasn't going to change that. Wade set the hairbrush down. It's not the same. No, it's not. You gotta say goodbye. I didn't. But we're both doing the same thing, trying to hold on to people who are gone by keeping everything exactly the way it was when they were still here. You don't know anything about it. You're right. I don't. Lena moved toward the door. But I know what it looks like when someone's drowning, and Wade, you're drowning. She left before he could respond. Her heart pounded the entire walk back to the kitchen. She'd crossed a line. Probably multiple lines. Wade would kick her out now, send her back into the cold with nowhere to go. But when dinner came around, Wade appeared at the table like always. He didn't mention the room, didn't mention their conversation. Just ate his meal in silence while Ellie chattered about town gossip and Lena tried to pretend her hands weren't shaking. After dinner, while Lena was washing dishes, Wade spoke without looking at her. The stove in your room doesn't work. Lena paused. I know. Why didn't you say something? Because I didn't want to be a problem. You're already a problem. Might as well be a warm problem. He stood, grabbing his coat. I'll fix it tomorrow. Then he was gone. Ellie appeared beside Lena, grinning. He's going to fix your stove. I heard. Lena, he's going to fix your stove. Wade hasn't fixed anything in this house since Sarah died. He barely maintains his own room, but he's going to fix yours. So? So that means something. It means he doesn't want me to freeze to death and cause him paperwork. It means he's starting to care whether you freeze to death. Ellie dried a plate, still smiling. Trust me, that's progress. That night, lying in her freezing room, wrapped in every blanket she owned, Lena thought about Wade standing in Sarah's room holding a dead woman's hairbrush. She thought about promises made to dying people. She thought about her father and how she'd promised him she'd be strong enough to survive without him. Some promises were easier to keep than others. The next morning, Wade appeared before breakfast with tools and started working on Lena's stove without a word. She tried to help, but he waved her off. I don't need help. I need you to make coffee. So Lena made coffee and tried not to watch the way Wade's hands moved, quick and efficient, the hands of someone who'd been fixing things his entire life. Within an hour, the stove worked. Heat flooded the small room for the first time since Lena had arrived. Thank you, she said. Wade packed up his tools. It's just a stove. Still, thank you. He paused in the doorway, not quite looking at her. What you said yesterday, about drowning. Lena waited. You weren't wrong. Then he left before she could respond. Over the next 2 weeks, something shifted at Iron Creek Ranch. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, but it shifted. Wade started eating meals at the table instead of taking his plate to the porch. Started asking Lena questions about where she'd come from, what the factory work had been like, why she'd chosen Montana over anywhere else. She answered carefully, never sure if he was genuinely interested or just making conversation to fill silence. Ellie blossomed under the attention. With Lena handling most of the cooking and cleaning, the younger girl had time to be 16 again. She started smiling more, laughing, making plans to visit friends in town instead of staying home constantly to keep the house together. Even the ranch hands seemed less hostile. Well, except Jack. Jack's animosity only grew. He made comments about Lena being Wade's new charity project. Started rumors in town about what exactly the pretty city girl was doing to earn her keep. Pushed boundaries in small ways, standing too close, talking too familiarly, finding excuses to touch her shoulder or brush past her. Wade noticed. One evening, he pulled Jack aside after dinner. Lena couldn't hear what was said, but she saw Jack's face go pale, saw him nod quickly and retreat like a scolded dog. After Jack left, Wade returned to the fire with his whiskey. He won't bother you again. What did you say to him? Nothing he didn't need to hear. Wade, let it go, Lena. So she did. But that night, lying in her now warm room, Lena realized something that should have terrified her but somehow didn't. She was starting to care what Wade thought, starting to notice the way he moved through rooms, the timbre of his voice when he was tired, the rare moments when something almost like a smile crossed his face, starting to want him to notice her the same way, which was stupid, dangerous. Wade was a man still in love with his dead wife, still keeping her room like a shrine, still drinking himself quiet every night to avoid feeling anything real. And Lena was just a starving girl he'd let stay out of obligation. Nothing more. She repeated that to herself until she almost believed it. Then came the morning everything changed. Lena woke to shouting. Not angry shouting, panicked shouting. She threw on clothes and ran outside to find Wade and the ranch hands standing around the barn, all of them staring at something that made Lena's blood go cold. Someone had painted a message across the barn doors in red paint that looked like blood. Sell or burn. Wade stood perfectly still, his expression unreadable in the early morning light. Who did this? Ellie appeared beside Lena, her voice shaking. Mercer. Wade's voice was flat, dead. Has to be. Who's Mercer? Lena asked. Thomas answered, his face grim. Harlan Mercer. Owns the railroad company, the bank, half the town council. He's been trying to buy Wade's land for over a year. Why? Silver, Ray said quietly. They found a vein about 2 miles from here last spring. Mercer thinks there's more under Wade's property. Wade walked toward the barn slowly, examining the painted message like it was a puzzle he needed to solve. He's escalating. What do we do? Jack asked, and for once there was no mockery in his voice, just genuine concern. Nothing. We do nothing. Wade turned to face them all. We keep working, keep running this ranch like always. Mercer wants me scared enough to sell. I'm not giving him that. Boss, if he's willing to threaten you like this, then let him threaten. Words don't scare me. Wade's eyes were hard. Now, someone get this cleaned off before Ellie has to see it again. The men scattered to find cleaning supplies. Ellie stood frozen, staring at the message. Lena put an arm around her shoulders. Come on, let's go inside. This is because of the silver, isn't it? I don't know. It is. It has to be. Mercer's been circling for months, making offers, spreading rumors. Ellie's voice cracked. What if he does burn it down? What if he hurts Wade? Your brother's not that easy to hurt. Everyone's easy to hurt if you know where to aim. They went inside, but Ellie couldn't sit still. She paced the kitchen, wringing her hands, jumping at every sound from outside. Lena made tea and forced her to drink it. It's going to be okay. You don't know that. No, but I know your brother's not the type to roll over for men like Mercer. That's what scares me. Wade's not the type to roll over for anyone. He'll fight until... Ellie stopped. Until something happens that he can't fight. Later, after the barn doors were cleaned and the morning work was done, Lena found Wade standing alone in the north pasture, staring at nothing. She approached slowly. You okay? Fine. You're lying. Wade glanced at her. You always this direct? Only when people are being stupid. That got something close to a smile. Close, but not quite. Mercer's not going to stop, Wade said. This is just the beginning. He'll keep pushing until either I sell or something forces me to sell. What could force you? Fire. Accident. Federal investigation. Mercer's got enough money and connections to make any of those happen. Wade's jaw clenched. I won't sell. This land was Sarah's dream as much as mine. Selling would be like putting away her things? Wade looked at her sharply. Yeah, like that. Lena stood beside him, both of them looking out over the valley. Snow covered everything in white that would stay frozen until April. My father had a saying, Lena said. The people who hurt us the most are the ones we refuse to let go. He was talking about grudges, but I think it works for grief too. You think I should let Sarah go? I think Sarah's already gone, and holding on to her so hard that you can't see what's right in front of you isn't honoring her. It's just another way of giving up. Wade was quiet for a long time. Then he said, You know what Sarah would have done? If she were here and Mercer painted that message? What? She would have painted something back, something funny, made a joke out of the whole thing to show Mercer he didn't scare her. Wade's voice got soft. She was good at that, finding humor in everything. Then maybe that's what you should do. I'm not Sarah. No, but you could try. Wade looked at Lena like he was seeing her for the first time. Really seeing her. Not the starving girl who'd shown up on his porch, not the charity case he was tolerating, but Lena herself. You're strange, you know that? I've been told. No, I mean, you show up half dead, barely survived the first week, and now you're standing here telling me how to handle my problems like you've been here for years. Would you prefer I keep my mouth shut? I don't know. I haven't decided yet. They stood in silence. Then Wade said, The stove working okay? Perfectly. Good. He walked back toward the ranch house, leaving Lena alone in the snow. But something had changed. She couldn't name it exactly, but she felt it. That night at dinner, Wade asked Lena about Pennsylvania, about her life before the fire, about what she'd wanted to do if the factory hadn't burned. I don't know, she admitted. I never thought about it. The factory was always there. Felt like it would always be there. What would you do now? If you could do anything? Lena considered. Maybe learn to read better. I can handle simple things, but nothing complicated. My father tried to teach me, but there was never enough time between shifts. Wade nodded slowly. There's books in the study. Sarah collected them. You could use them. Really? They're just sitting there. Might as well be useful to someone. After dinner, Lena found Wade in the study, pulling books from shelves and stacking them on the desk. "These are good ones to start with," he said, not looking at her. "Not too complicated. Sarah liked them." "Wade, don't make a thing out of it. They're just books." But it was a thing, because Wade was finally letting something of Sarah's be used, be touched, be part of the living world again instead of locked away in the shrine of the past. Lena picked up the first book, a novel about a woman traveling west. "Thank you." Wade's eyes met hers, and for just a moment, Lena saw the man from the wedding photograph, the one who knew how to smile, the one who wasn't hollowed out by grief. Then the moment passed and Wade returned to himself. But Lena had seen it, and that made all the difference. The threats from Mercer didn't stop. 3 days after the painted message, someone cut the water line to the cattle troughs. Wade spent an entire afternoon in freezing cold repairing pipes while his livestock went thirsty. A week after that, a shipment of feed that Wade had paid for in advance never arrived. The supplier claimed the order had been canceled. Wade knew better. Then the bank started making noise about his loan payments. Wade had never missed a payment in 15 years. But suddenly the bank manager, a nervous man named Fletcher, who everyone knew was in Mercer's pocket, started sending letters about irregularities and concerns about property valuation. "They're setting up to foreclose," Thomas said one evening after Wade had read the latest letter aloud to his ranch hands. "Mercer's probably promised Fletcher a cut if he can force you out." "Let them try." Wade threw the letter into the fire. "My payments are current. They've got no legal grounds." "Legal grounds don't matter when the judge is bought," Jack muttered. For once, Lena agreed with him. She'd seen it before in Pennsylvania, factory owners who paid off judges and sheriffs to rule in their favor, workers who got thrown in jail for demanding fair wages, families evicted on false pretenses because someone with money wanted their land. The law only protected people who could afford it. Everyone else just had to survive. But Wade seemed determined to fight properly, to follow rules in a game where his opponent had already thrown out the rulebook. Lena watched him wrestle with it night after night, sitting by the fire with legal documents spread across his lap, trying to find loopholes that didn't exist. One night, after everyone else had gone to bed, Lena sat down across from him. "You're going to lose if you keep playing fair." Wade looked up from the papers, exhaustion clear in his eyes. "What are you suggesting?" "I'm not suggesting anything. I'm just saying Mercer's not playing fair, and at some point you have to decide if you're willing to do the same." "I'm not like him." "I know, but being better than someone doesn't help much when they've already won." Wade set the papers aside. "Sarah used to say something similar, that integrity without strategy is just another word for losing." He rubbed his face. "I never understood what she meant until after she was gone." Lena pulled her shawl tighter. The fire was dying and neither of them moved to add wood. What would she do? If she were here? "Fight dirty." Wade almost smiled. Sarah looked soft, but she grew up poor, knew how the world actually worked. She would have already found a way to make Mercer regret starting this. "Then do that." "I can't, because if I start fighting the way Mercer fights, what's the difference between us?" "The difference is you're fighting to keep something that's yours. He's fighting to take something that isn't." Wade was quiet for a long moment, staring into the dying fire. "You sound like you've thought about this before." "I watched my father die in a factory fire because the owners locked the exits to prevent theft. They knew it was dangerous. They did it anyway because profit mattered more than people." Lena's voice stayed steady, but her hands clenched in her lap. "After the fire, they blamed the workers, said we were careless with lanterns, and everyone believed them because they had money and lawyers, and we had nothing." "What happened to the owners?" "Nothing. They collected insurance money and rebuilt somewhere else." Wade's jaw tightened. "That's not going to happen here." "Then you need to stop playing by rules that only apply to you." Before Wade could respond, the sound of breaking glass came from somewhere outside. Both of them were on their feet immediately. Wade grabbed the rifle that he kept beside the door and moved onto the porch. Lena followed despite his gesture to stay inside. The barn was on fire. Not the whole barn, just one corner where hay was stored. But fire spread fast in winter when everything was dry and wind pushed flames in every direction. Wade was running before Lena could process what she was seeing. She ran after him. By the time they reached the barn, smoke was already thick enough to choke on. The horses inside were screaming, high, terrible sounds that cut through the night. "Get the horses out!" Wade shouted, already disappearing into the smoke. Lena grabbed the nearest stall door and hauled it open. The horse inside reared, terrified, nearly trampling her before she got out of the way. It bolted past her into the snow. She moved to the next stall. The smoke was worse now, burning her lungs with every breath. Her eyes watered so badly she could barely see. But she found the door latch and pulled. This horse wouldn't move. It stood frozen in terror, eyes rolling white, legs locked. Lena grabbed the halter and pulled. Nothing. The animal outweighed her by 1,000 pounds, and fear made it immovable. "Come on," she gasped, coughing. "Please, come on." Behind her, something crashed, wood splintering. The fire was spreading faster than she'd thought possible. Wade appeared out of the smoke, blood running down his face from somewhere, leading 2 more horses. "Get out!" he yelled when he saw her. "This one won't move." Wade shoved the horses he was holding toward the door and they bolted. Then he was beside Lena, grabbing the frozen horse's halter with both hands. "Go. Now. That's an order." Not without... A beam fell from the ceiling, missing them by inches. Sparks exploded everywhere. The horse finally broke its paralysis and lunged forward, nearly knocking both of them down as it fled. Wade grabbed Lena's arm and dragged her toward the exit. They made it outside just as part of the roof collapsed inward with a sound like thunder. Lena fell to her knees in the snow, coughing so hard she thought her lungs might tear. Wade bent double beside her, his breathing ragged. By now, lights were on in the main house. Ellie appeared on the porch, screaming something Lena couldn't hear over the roar of flames. The ranch hands came running from the bunkhouse. But even as they formed a bucket line from the pump, everyone could see it was too late. The barn was going to burn to the ground. They fought it anyway. For hours. Until dawn light turned the smoke gray and the fire finally died to smoldering embers because there was nothing left to burn. Wade stood looking at the wreckage, his face black with soot, the cut on his forehead still bleeding slowly. Ray found the evidence first. A broken whiskey bottle near the back wall where the fire had started, still reeking of kerosene. This wasn't an accident. Nobody disagreed. Jack kicked through debris, his expression murderous. "Mercer, has to be." "We don't know that," Wade said, but his voice was hollow. "Who else would it be? This happens right after he threatens you? Right after the bank starts sniffing around?" Thomas gestured at the ruins. "Boss, he's trying to burn you out." Wade didn't respond. He just stood there, staring at smoke still rising from blackened timbers. Lena wanted to say something, wanted to offer comfort or rage or anything that might penetrate the walls she could see rebuilding around him with every passing second. But before she could speak, a child's voice cut through the morning. "Mr. Coulter!" Everyone turned. A woman Lena didn't recognize stood at the property line, holding a small boy by the hand. The child couldn't have been more than 9 years old, thin and pale and shaking. "Mrs. Patterson?" Ellie moved toward them. "What are you doing here?" The woman looked terrified. "I'm sorry to bother you after all this. But Noah was here yesterday, playing with the ranch cats, and he saw something." Wade's attention sharpened. "Saw what?" The boy, Noah, stepped forward, his voice barely audible. "I saw a man. Near the barn. Yesterday evening, right before dark." "What man?" "I don't know his name, but he works for Mr. Mercer. I've seen him in town." Noah swallowed. "He was carrying a bottle and looking around like he didn't want anyone to see him." The silence that followed felt like the moment before an avalanche. Wade's expression went absolutely cold. Not hot angry, cold. The kind of cold that meant someone was about to get hurt badly. "Thank you for telling me," Wade said to the boy, his voice carefully controlled. "You did the right thing." Mrs. Patterson grabbed her son's hand and left quickly, like she didn't want to be anywhere near what was about to happen. As soon as they were gone, Jack turned to Wade. "We riding to town, or are we going straight to Mercer's place?" "Neither." Wade's jaw was set. "We're going to the sheriff." "The sheriff's in Mercer's pocket," Thomas protested. "Everyone knows it." "Doesn't matter. We do this the right way or not at all." "Wade, I said no." The ranch hands exchanged looks but didn't argue further. Lena watched Wade walk back toward the house, his shoulders rigid, every line of his body screaming tension he wouldn't release. She followed him inside. He went straight to the sink and started washing the blood and soot from his face. His hands shook slightly as he scrubbed. "You can't let this go," Lena said quietly. "I'm not letting it go. I'm handling it properly." "Properly won't work. You said yourself the sheriff's bought." "Then I'll go over his head. Federal marshals, territorial authorities, someone who isn't on Mercer's payroll. And in the meantime, what if he burns the house next? What if someone gets hurt?" Wade turned on her, water still dripping from his face. "What exactly are you suggesting I do, Lena? Ride into town and shoot Mercer? Burn his house down? Start a war that'll get everyone on this ranch killed or arrested?" "I'm suggesting you stop pretending the law is going to save you when it hasn't saved anyone else Mercer's gone after. The law is all we've got. The law didn't save my father. It didn't save those other ranchers Mercer pushed out. It won't save you either." Wade stepped closer, his eyes hard. "Then what's your brilliant plan? Since you seem to have all the answers." Lena held his gaze, refusing to back down despite her heart hammering. "Make him more afraid of you than you are of him." "I'm not afraid of Mercer." "Yes, you are. You're terrified. Because fighting him means risking everything you have left. Means potentially losing this ranch the same way you lost Sarah." Her voice softened slightly. "But Wade, you're losing it anyway. At least if you fight back, you go down swinging." Wade's hands clenched at his sides. For a second, Lena thought he might actually hit something or walk away and never speak to her again. Instead, he said very quietly, "Get out." "Wade, I said get out." Lena left. She found Ellie in the kitchen, red-eyed from crying, mechanically making breakfast that nobody would eat. "Is he okay?" Ellie asked. "No." "What's he gonna do?" "I don't know." They worked in silence for a while. Outside, the ranch hands were salvaging what they could from the barn, tools that hadn't burned, equipment that was still usable. The horses had been rounded up and temporarily penned in the north pasture. Around noon, Wade left for town without telling anyone where he was going. He came back 3 hours later looking even worse than when he'd left. "Sheriff says there's no proof," Wade announced to everyone gathered in the main room. "Says a child's testimony isn't reliable. Says the bottle could have been left there weeks ago. Says without witnesses or evidence directly tying Mercer to the fire, there's nothing he can do." "That's horseshit," Jack said flatly. "That's the law." "Then the law's broken." Wade didn't disagree. That night, Lena found Wade in Sarah's room. He was sitting on the bed holding that hairbrush again, staring at nothing. She almost left, almost let him have his grief in private. But something made her step inside. "I'm sorry," she said, "for what I said earlier. It wasn't my place." Wade didn't look at her. "You were right." "I don't think I was. I'm afraid of losing this place, of failing Sarah again." He set the hairbrush down carefully. "After she died, this ranch was the only thing I had left, the only piece of her that still existed. If I lose it, you won't lose it. You don't know that." "No, but I know you're not the type to give up without a fight." Wade finally looked at her. His eyes were red-rimmed, exhausted, defeated in a way Lena had never seen before. What if fighting isn't enough? Lena sat down beside him on the bed, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. "My father used to say that sometimes the only difference between winning and losing is whether you're still standing when it's over. Doesn't matter how you look. Doesn't matter what you lost getting there. If you're still standing, you haven't lost yet." Sounds like he was a smart man. He was a factory worker who died in a fire because his bosses valued profit over safety. Smart didn't save him. Wade was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Tell me about him. Your father." So Lena did. She told Wade about working alongside her father in the textile factory, about how he'd hum while he worked to make the hours pass faster, about how he'd saved every spare penny to buy her books, even though he could barely read himself, about how he'd promised her things would get better someday, that they'd save enough to leave Pennsylvania and start over somewhere new. "He never gave up hoping," Lena said. "Even when things were impossible, he kept believing we'd find a way through." "What happened to that hope? After he died?" Lena thought about it. "I guess I'm still carrying it, just differently, not hoping things will magically improve, hoping I'm strong enough to survive when they don't." Wade looked at her like he was seeing something he hadn't noticed before. "You are, strong enough. So are you." "I don't feel strong. I feel tired." "That's not the same thing as weak." They sat in silence while darkness gathered outside the window. Eventually, Wade spoke again. Sarah and I used to sit here at night and plan the future. What we'd do with the ranch, how many children we'd have, where we'd travel once we could afford it. His voice got rough. Every plan had her in it, and now she's gone, and I don't know how to make new plans that don't. Maybe you don't have to. Maybe you just take it one day at a time until the plans sort themselves out. Wade almost smiled. Is that what you're doing? Every single day. Something shifted between them in that moment. Some understanding that Lena couldn't quite name, but could feel like a change in air pressure before a storm. Wade's hand moved slightly on the bed, close enough that his fingers almost touched hers. Lena didn't move away. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The house was quiet around them. Outside, wind rattled the windows. Then Ellie's voice called from downstairs. "Wade, someone's here to see you." The moment broke. Wade stood, the careful distance reasserting itself. "We should go." Downstairs, they found a man Lena didn't recognize standing in the main room, hat in his hands, looking nervous. "Mr. Coulter, I'm sorry to bother you so late." "Who are you?" "Henry Walsh. I own the feed store in town." Walsh shifted his weight. "I heard about your barn, and I heard what the sheriff said about evidence." Wade's expression went carefully neutral. "What about it?" "I've got evidence. Mercer's foreman, man named Davies, came into my store 2 days ago, bought 3 bottles of kerosene and some rope. Paid cash, didn't want a receipt." Walsh paused. "I thought it was strange at the time, but didn't think much of it. Then I heard about your fire." "You willing to testify to that?" Walsh hesitated. "Mr. Coulter, Mercer does business with half the town. If I testify against his foreman, he'll make sure I lose suppliers, customers, everything." "Then why are you here?" "Because what happened to you could happen to any of us, and if we all stay quiet out of fear, Mercer wins every time." Walsh straightened slightly. "I'll testify. But I need to know you're going to see this through, that you won't back down when Mercer pushes back." Wade looked at the man for a long moment. Then he held out his hand. "You've got my word." Walsh shook it. "Then I'll go to the territorial authorities tomorrow. Give them my statement." After Walsh left, the room erupted. "This is it," Thomas said. "This is what we need to nail him." "One witness isn't enough," Jack countered. "Mercer's lawyers will tear him apart." "It's a start," Ray said quietly. Wade held up a hand for silence. "Walsh is risking everything to come forward. We don't waste that." He looked at each of them in turn. "Thomas, I want you to find anyone else who's seen Davies or any of Mercer's people near this property in the last month. Ray, talk to other ranchers, see if anyone else has had similar problems. Jack?" Jack straightened. "Boss, you know Mercer's operation better than anyone. You used to work for him before you came here. I need to know his weaknesses. Who's loyal? Who's bought? Who might turn if given the chance?" Jack's face was unreadable. "You asking me to spy on him?" "I'm asking you to do whatever it takes to protect this ranch." For a long moment, Jack didn't respond. Then he nodded once, sharply. "I'm in." After the ranch hands left, Wade sat down heavily at the table, exhaustion finally catching up to him. Lena brought him coffee without being asked. "Thank you," he said quietly. "For the coffee?" "For pushing me earlier, for saying what needed to be said even when I didn't want to hear it." Lena sat across from him. "I wasn't trying to push. I was trying to help." "I know. That's why it worked." Ellie appeared in the doorway, wrapped in a shawl. "I'm going to bed. Unless you need me?" "We're fine," Wade said. "Sleep." After Ellie left, Lena and Wade sat in comfortable silence, drinking coffee while the fire burned low. "What happens now?" Lena asked eventually. "Now we wait. Walsh gives his statement, the authorities investigate. Hopefully they find enough evidence to arrest Davies. Then Davies either stays loyal to Mercer or he doesn't. And if he stays loyal, then we keep fighting, keep gathering evidence, keep pushing until something breaks." Wade met her eyes. "I'm done playing defense. Mercer wants a war. He's got one." Lena heard the determination in his voice, but she also heard something else, something that sounded almost like hope. The following days passed in tense waiting. Walsh kept his word and testified to territorial authorities. Within 24 hours, they'd arrested Davies on suspicion of arson. The news spread through the valley like wildfire. Mercer responded by calling in every favor he was owed. The town judge suddenly declared he was recusing himself from any cases involving Iron Creek Ranch. Two witnesses who'd been about to come forward mysteriously changed their stories, and the bank accelerated their foreclosure proceedings, claiming Wade's property value had dropped due to recent damage. But Wade had momentum now, and he wasn't alone anymore. Other ranchers started coming forward with their own stories of Mercer's intimidation. Shop owners who'd been forced to give Mercer preferential treatment, workers who'd been threatened into silence. A pattern emerged that even Mercer's money couldn't completely hide. Through it all, Lena watched Wade transform. The hollowed-out man who'd first opened the door to her was slowly being replaced by someone harder, sharper. More like the man in the wedding photograph, but tempered by loss into something stronger. He still drank his whiskey at night, still kept Sarah's room unchanged. But now he also made plans, strategized, fought back with the kind of focused intensity that Lena found both impressive and slightly terrifying. One evening, about a week after Walsh's testimony, Lena found Wade working through legal documents at the kitchen table, a lamp burning low beside him. She sat down across from him without speaking. After a moment, Wade looked up. "Can't sleep?" "Could ask you the same thing." "I'll sleep when this is over." "That could be months from now." "Then I'll sleep in months." Lena reached across the table and took the documents from his hands. "What are you doing?" Wade asked. "Making sure you don't collapse before you get the chance to win." She set the papers aside. "When's the last time you ate a full meal? Or slept more than 4 hours? Or did anything that wasn't related to fighting Mercer?" "I don't have time for—" "You don't have time to collapse either, but you will if you keep this up." Wade looked like he wanted to argue, but instead he just leaned back in his chair, rubbing his face tiredly. "I can't stop. Because if I stop, I start thinking about everything that could go wrong. Every way this could end with me losing everything. That's going to happen whether you eat dinner or not. You're not helping. I'm not trying to help. I'm trying to keep you alive long enough to see this through." Wade's eyes met hers across the table. And there it was again, that shift in the air between them, that awareness that something was building that neither of them had acknowledged yet. "Why do you care?" Wade asked quietly. It was a fair question. Lena had been asking herself the same thing for weeks now. "Because someone has to," she said finally. "And because you gave me a place to stay when I had nowhere else. That means something." "That's it? Obligation?" "No, that's not it." "Then what?" Lena looked at this man, this giant, grief-stricken, impossible man who'd let her into his house and his life when he barely wanted to be alive himself. "I don't know yet," she said honestly. "But whatever it is, it's enough to make me want you to survive this." Wade held her gaze for a long moment. Then he picked up his coffee and drained it. "All right, I'll eat. But then I'm finishing these documents." "Fair enough." Lena made him a plate, leftover stew, bread, cheese, and watched him eat with the kind of mechanical efficiency that said he was only doing it because she'd asked. When he finished, Wade did go back to his documents. But something had changed. Some tension had eased, replaced by a quiet companionship that felt more significant than it probably should have. Lena stayed up with him, mending clothes by lamplight, not talking, but simply present. Around midnight, Wade finally set aside the papers. "I think I'm done for tonight." "Good." They stood, both tired, both aware of how close they were standing in the small kitchen. "Lena," Wade said. "Yeah? Thank you. For staying." "I wasn't planning on going anywhere." Wade's hand lifted slightly, like he might touch her face, then fell back to his side. "Good night." "Good night." Lena watched him climb the stairs toward his room, her heart doing something complicated in her chest that she refused to examine too closely. Then she went to her own bed and lay awake for a long time, listening to the house settle and wondering when exactly she'd stopped thinking about surviving and started thinking about staying. Davies broke after 3 days in custody. The news came through a messenger who rode out to Iron Creek at dawn. Davies had confessed to setting the fire under Mercer's direct orders. He'd also implicated Mercer in half a dozen other crimes spanning the last 2 years, including intimidation, fraud, and bribing local officials. Wade read the message twice, standing in the doorway with morning light cutting across his face. "They're arresting Mercer today." The kitchen went silent. Ellie dropped the plate she was holding. It shattered on the floor, but nobody moved to clean it up. "Are you sure?" Thomas asked, appearing from the back hallway. Wade handed him the message. "Federal marshals are heading to his estate this morning. They want me in town to give a formal statement." "This is it, then." Jack's voice came from behind them. He looked like he hadn't slept. "We actually won." "Don't celebrate yet," Wade said, but there was something in his voice that hadn't been there before. Something that might have been relief. "Mercer's got lawyers and money and connections that go all the way to the territorial governor. He'll fight this." "Let him fight from a jail cell," Ray said. Wade left for town within the hour. Lena watched him ride away with Thomas and Jack flanking him. All three men armed, all three looking like they expected trouble, even with federal marshals involved. Ellie cleaned up the broken plate, her hands shaking slightly. "Is it really over?" "I don't know," Lena said honestly. "Men like Mercer don't go down easy." "But they arrested him. That means something." "It means the fight's moved from the ranch to a courtroom. Different battlefield, same war?" Ellie sat down heavily. "I'm tired of fighting. I just want things to be normal again." Lena understood that exhaustion. She felt it in her bones, in every part of her that had been running on fear and determination for months now. But she also knew that normal didn't come back just because you were tired of the alternative. Wade returned late that afternoon, his expression unreadable. "Well?" Ellie demanded the second he walked through the door. "Mercer's in custody, denied bail because of flight risk. His lawyers are already filing motions, but the marshals seem confident they've got enough to make charges stick." Wade set his hat on the table. "Trial won't be for months. Maybe longer." "But we won," Ellie insisted. "We actually won." Wade looked at his sister for a long moment. "We survived. That's not the same thing as winning." He went upstairs before anyone could respond. Lena found him an hour later in Sarah's room, standing by the window, staring out at the valley. "You want to be alone?" "Doesn't matter what I want." Lena stepped inside anyway. "You should feel good about this. Mercer's arrested. The ranch is safe. For now. Until his lawyers find a loophole or a judge who can be bought or some technicality that gets the charges thrown out." Wade's voice was flat. "This isn't over. It's just paused." "That's still better than losing." "Is it?" "Because right now all I feel is tired. And angry that I have to feel tired because some rich bastard decided my land was worth more than my life." Wade turned to face her. "You know what the worst part is?" "What?" "Even if Mercer goes to prison, even if we keep the ranch, even if everything works out exactly like it's supposed to, Sarah's still dead. This place is still half destroyed, and I'm still standing here wondering what the point of any of it was." Lena crossed the room to stand beside him at the window. "The point is you're still here. Ellie's still here. The ranch is still standing. That's not nothing. It doesn't feel like enough. It never does. But it's what we've got." They stood in silence, watching afternoon light fade across frozen fields. Eventually Wade spoke again, quieter this time. "When Sarah died, I promised her I'd keep living, that I wouldn't give up." He paused. "I broke that promise pretty much immediately, just went through the motions until even the motions felt pointless. And now? Now I don't know. Fighting Mercer gave me something to focus on besides grief, but now that it's over or paused or whatever this is, I'm back to that same empty feeling, that same question of why I'm still doing any of this." Lena looked at him. This man who'd survived his wife's death and a winter that would have killed most people and a sustained attack from someone with 10 times his resources. "You're doing it because you're not dead yet. And as long as you're not dead, you might as well do something with the time." That's the bleakest philosophy I've ever heard. Welcome to being poor. We don't get hopeful philosophies. Wade almost laughed. Almost. How do you do it? Keep going when everything's gone wrong? I don't know. I just wake up every morning and do the next thing that needs doing. Eventually, enough next things add up to a life. Wade turned to look at her properly. Is that what this is for you? Just the next thing? What do you mean? Being here. At this ranch. With... He trailed off, something uncertain crossing his face. Lena's heart did that complicated thing again. At first, yes. It was just survival. Nowhere else to go, nothing else to do. She paused, choosing words carefully. But it's not just that anymore. Then what is it? Before Lena could answer, Ellie's voice called from downstairs. Wade! Someone's here! The moment shattered. Wade moved toward the door, that careful distance reasserting itself between them. Downstairs, they found a woman Lena didn't recognize standing in the main room, well-dressed in a way that said, money, looking around the house with barely concealed distaste. Wade Coulter? That's me. I'm Margaret Thornton. I represent the First Bank of Montana. She pulled papers from her bag. I'm here to serve notice that your loan has been called in full. Payment is due within 30 days, or the bank will begin foreclosure proceedings. The silence that followed felt like falling. Wade took the papers slowly, reading them with an expression that went from confused to angry to something worse than angry. This loan isn't due for another 8 years. There's an acceleration clause in your contract, Mr. Coulter. In the event of significant property damage or loss of collateral value, the bank has the right to demand immediate repayment. Thornton's voice was professionally neutral. The fire damage to your barn constitutes such an event. The fire was arson. Mercer's man confessed. That's irrelevant to the bank's position. The damage occurred. The property value dropped. The clause activates. She pulled out another document. You currently owe $42,000. Payment in full within 30 days. Wade stared at her. I don't have $42,000. Then you have 30 days to find it. Otherwise, the bank will seize the property and sell it at auction to recover the debt. Thornton put the papers back in her bag. I'll show myself out. She left before anyone could respond. Ellie grabbed the papers from Wade's hands, reading frantically. This can't be legal. Can this be legal? It's legal, Wade said, his voice hollow. I signed the contract. The clause is in there. I just never thought... He sat down heavily. I never thought they'd actually use it. But Mercer's arrested, Ellie insisted. The bank can't just... The bank isn't Mercer. The bank is protecting its investment. From their perspective, I'm a risk now. Property damaged, legal troubles, uncertain future. Wade laughed, but there was no humor in it. They're probably right. So what do we do? Ray asked. He'd appeared in the doorway with Thomas, both of them having heard everything. I don't know. Can you borrow the money? From other ranchers, maybe? Nobody has that kind of cash, not in winter. Not with everything else going on. What about selling part of the land? Thomas suggested. To who? The only person who wants it is Mercer, and he's in jail. Wade rubbed his face. Even if I found a buyer, selling wouldn't raise enough fast enough. Lena felt something cold settle in her stomach. After everything they'd fought for, after Mercer's arrest and Davy's confession and Walsh risking everything to testify, they were going to lose anyway, not to arson or intimidation or violence, to a clause in a contract that Wade had signed years ago when his wife was alive and the future looked different. That night, nobody ate much dinner. Wade disappeared to the study with the loan documents, trying to find some loophole or solution that didn't exist. Ellie cried quietly in her room. The ranch hands sat around the bunkhouse, probably trying to figure out where they'd work once Iron Creek was gone. Lena cleaned the kitchen mechanically, her mind racing through possibilities. $42,000. 30 days. Impossible. Around midnight, she found Wade still in the study, papers spread everywhere, whiskey bottle empty beside him. Any luck? No? Lena sat down. Tell me there's something, some way out of this. There isn't. I've been through every document, every clause, every possible angle. The bank's within their rights, the loan is due, and I can't pay it. Wade's eyes were bloodshot, exhausted. Mercer wins. Even from a jail cell, he wins. There has to be something. There isn't, Wade's voice cracked. I fought for months, done everything right, played by the rules, got Mercer arrested. And it doesn't matter because some lawyer found a legal way to take everything anyway. Then we'll fight the foreclosure. With what? I'm out of money, out of favors, out of options. He gestured at the papers. In 30 days, this ranch gets sold at auction, probably to one of Mercer's shell companies, and there's not a single thing I can do to stop it. Lena looked at this man who'd survived so much, who'd fought so hard, who'd finally started to heal, and now it was all falling apart anyway. What about Sarah's family? Could they help? Sarah's parents died years ago. No siblings, no money. Your parents? Dead. And they never had money to begin with. Then we'll find another bank. Refinance somewhere else. No bank will touch me now, not with this hanging over my head. Lena's mind raced, trying to find some solution that Wade hadn't already exhausted. What if we sold something else? Equipment? Livestock? Cattle prices are garbage in winter. Equipment won't raise a fraction of what we need. Wade leaned back in his chair. It's over, Lena. We lost. I don't accept that. Well, I do. Because I'm tired of fighting battles I can't win. Tired of watching everything I care about get destroyed while I stand here helpless. His voice dropped. Maybe Mercer did me a favor. Maybe losing this place will finally force me to stop pretending Sarah's still here. Is that what you think this is? Pretending. I don't know what it is anymore. I just know I'm exhausted, and I don't have another fight left in me. Lena stood, anger rising in her chest. So that's it? You're just giving up? I'm accepting reality. You're quitting. There's a difference. What do you want from me, Lena? You want me to magically produce $42,000? You want me to fight the bank with lawyers I can't afford? You want me to keep pretending there's a way out of this when we both know there isn't? I want you to act like the man who pulled me out of a burning barn, the man who fought Mercer for months, the man who promised Sarah he'd keep living. Wade stood so fast his chair fell backwards. Sarah's dead. This ranch is dead. And I'm so tired of people expecting me to keep caring when caring is what destroys you. The words hung in the air between them. Lena's hands were shaking, but she held his gaze. You're right. Caring destroys you. Loving people destroys you. Trying destroys you. She stepped closer. But you know what destroys you faster? Giving up before it's actually over. It is over. It's not over until they drag you off this property in chains, and maybe not even then. You don't understand. I understand that my father died in a factory fire because he went to work every day in a building he knew was dangerous because he cared about keeping me fed. I understand that caring killed him. But you know what? I'd rather die caring than survive by not giving a damn about anything. Wade stared at her, something breaking open in his expression. Why do you care so much? This isn't your ranch, isn't your fight. You could leave tomorrow and find work somewhere else. Because I don't want somewhere else. The words burst out of Lena before she could stop them. I don't want another ranch or another job or another place where I'm just surviving until the next disaster. I want to stay here, with Ellie, with this broken down house and these impossible problems and you. Wade went very still. Lena, don't say whatever you're about to say. Don't tell me I'm confused or it's just gratitude or I don't know what I'm talking about. She was shaking now, months of carefully controlled feelings spilling out. I'm 23 years old. I've watched my father die, walked through a blizzard, survived starvation. I think I know the difference between gratitude and wanting to stay because leaving would hurt worse than any of that. The silence stretched. Wade crossed the distance between them in 2 steps. His hands came up to cup her face, rough and gentle at the same time. If I kiss you right now, he said quietly, it means something. It means I'm choosing this, choosing you, choosing to care about someone again when caring is the most terrifying thing I can think of. I know. And if we lose the ranch anyway, if everything falls apart despite this, then we lose it together. Wade kissed her, not carefully, not tentatively, but like a man who'd been drowning and finally remembered how to breathe. Lena's hands fisted in his shirt, pulling him closer, kissing him back with months of want and fear and determination. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Wade rested his forehead against hers. I don't have answers. Don't have solutions. Don't even know if we can save this place. I don't care. You should care, because staying means going down with a sinking ship. Then we'll sink, but at least we won't sink alone. Wade pulled her closer, his arms wrapping around her like he was afraid she might disappear. They stood like that for a long time, holding each other in the study while the fire burned low and the ranch settled around them. Eventually, Ellie's voice drifted down from upstairs. Wade? You still awake? They separated reluctantly. I should go, Lena whispered. Stay, please. So she did. They went upstairs together, and when Wade walked Lena to her room, He kissed her again at the doorway, softer this time, but no less intense. "Tomorrow, we'll figure something out," he said. "You don't believe that." "No, but I'm going to try anyway." Lena watched him walk to his own room, her heart doing that complicated thing that she'd finally stopped pretending to ignore. She loved him. She'd probably loved him for weeks now, maybe from the moment he'd caught her when she collapsed. And they were going to lose everything anyway. But somehow, that made it matter more, instead of less. The next morning brought unexpected news. A lawyer named Harrison arrived from Billings with documents that made Wade read them 3 times before he believed what they said. "I don't understand," Wade said slowly. "Where did this come from?" Harrison adjusted his spectacles. "Your wife set up a trust before she died. Small life insurance policy that she'd kept since before you were married. The payout was placed in a managed account with specific instructions." "What instructions?" "That the money could only be accessed in the event of catastrophic financial emergency threatening the ranch. She defined catastrophic as debt exceeding $30,000 that couldn't be paid through normal means." Harrison smiled slightly. "Your current situation qualifies." Wade stared at the papers. Sarah had done this. Years ago, probably when they'd first gotten married and she was still thinking about worst-case scenarios. She'd set aside money for a disaster she'd never lived to see. "How much is in the trust?" $38,500, not quite enough to cover your full debt, but close." Wade sat down, his hands shaking. Ellie looked at the documents over his shoulder, tears already streaming down her face. "Sarah saved us. Even now, she's still saving us." Lena felt something twist in her chest. Relief, yes, but also something more complicated. Sarah's ghost was pulling Wade back from the edge. The wife he'd lost was saving the ranch through careful planning and love that extended beyond death. And Lena was standing here realizing that she'd never be able to compete with that kind of love. Wouldn't want to, even if she could. Wade looked up at Harrison. "How do I access the money?" "I'll need signatures and verification, then I can transfer it to your bank. Should take 3 to 5 business days. That's cutting it close to the 30-day deadline." "We'll make it work. The important thing is you have the funds." After Harrison left to begin the paperwork, the house erupted in celebration. Ellie hugged everyone. The ranch hands actually smiled. Even Wade managed something that resembled relief. But when Lena caught his eye across the room, she saw the same complicated emotion she was feeling. Gratitude to Sarah. Guilt about last night. Confusion about what any of it meant. That evening, after everyone had calmed down, Wade found Lena in the kitchen. "We need to talk." "I know." They went outside despite the cold, needing privacy. "Last night," Wade started. "Was last night. Today you found out your dead wife saved the ranch. Those are 2 different things." "They're not different. They're connected." Wade ran a hand through his hair. "Sarah planned for this. Thought ahead. Protected me even after she was gone. And I was in that study ready to give up until I pushed you. Made you angry. Kissed you. Until you reminded me why any of this matters." Lena looked at him in the darkness. "I'm not Sarah, Wade. I can't be her. Can't replace her. Can't compete with the kind of love that sets up trust funds and makes plans and saves you from beyond the grave. I'm not asking you to be her." "Then what are you asking?" Wade stepped closer. "I'm asking if what I feel for you is real or if I'm just desperate for someone to care about. I'm asking if you meant what you said about staying. I'm asking..." He paused. "I'm asking if it's possible to love someone who's gone and still start loving someone who's here." Lena's breath caught. "I don't know. Is it? I think it has to be. Because I don't want to choose between honoring Sarah's memory and moving forward with you. I want both. But I don't know if that's fair to either of you." "Life's not fair. We've both figured that out by now." "That's not an answer." "No, it's not." Lena thought for a moment. "But here's what I know. Sarah loved you enough to protect you even after she died. That's not something to feel guilty about. That's something to honor by actually living the life she saved. And you?" "I'm here because I want to be, not because I'm trying to replace anyone or fill some void. I'm here because being here matters to me. You matter to me." She paused. "If that's enough, then we'll figure out the rest. If it's not, then tell me now before this gets more complicated." Wade was quiet for a long moment. Then he pulled her close and kissed her like he'd been waiting his entire life to do it. When they broke apart, he said, "It's enough. You're enough." Even with everything? Especially with everything. They stood in the cold, holding each other while Montana winter pressed down around them. Inside, the ranch was safe. The debt would be paid. Mercer was in jail, and two people who'd both lost everything were standing in the darkness, trying to figure out how to build something new from the wreckage. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't simple, but it was real. And for now, that was enough. The money transfer went through on day 27. Wade rode to town with Harrison to deliver the payment personally, refusing to trust it to mail or messenger. Lena watched him leave at dawn, the leather satchel containing Sarah's final gift strapped across his chest like armor. He came back 6 hours later, walking differently. Not lighter exactly, but straighter, like he'd been carrying weight for so long he'd forgotten what upright felt like. "It's done," he said, standing in the doorway, covered in road dust. "The loan's paid. The ranch is ours." Ellie screamed and threw herself at him, nearly knocking him over. The ranch hands whooped and clapped each other on the back. Ray actually smiled, which Lena had never seen before. And through it all, Wade's eyes found Lena across the room with an expression that said everything words couldn't. We survived. That night, they celebrated with the best meal Lena could manage from what they had. Venison that Thomas had hunted, potatoes from the root cellar, bread that actually rose properly for once. Even Wade drank less than usual, staying present instead of disappearing into the bottom of a bottle. After dinner, while everyone else lingered around the fire trading stories and laughing, Wade pulled Lena aside. "Come with me. I want to show you something." They walked out into the cold, Wade carrying a lantern, heading toward the half-rebuilt barn. Inside, the smell of fresh lumber mixed with old smoke. The structure was maybe 40% complete, enough to shelter equipment and a few horses, but nowhere near what it had been. Wade set the lantern down and turned to face her. "When Sarah and I first bought this place, the barn was the first thing we built. Took us 3 months working dawn to dusk every day. She was terrible at carpentry, but she insisted on helping anyway." He touched one of the old beams that had survived the fire. "After she died, I couldn't look at this place without seeing her. Everywhere I turned, she was there. In the walls we'd built, the stalls we'd painted, the loft where we used to sit and plan our future." Lena waited, letting him work through whatever he needed to say. "When it burned, part of me was almost relieved. Like, maybe if enough of the physical things disappeared, the grief would go with them." Wade's voice got rough. "But it didn't work that way. The grief stayed, just shifted into guilt that I'd let something Sarah built get destroyed." "It wasn't your fault. Door parts." I know, logically I know, but logic doesn't help much with grief." He looked at Lena. "The point is, rebuilding this barn has been the hardest thing I've done since she died. Because every nail I hammer, every board I place, I'm choosing to build something new instead of preserving what was. And that feels like betrayal. It's not betrayal, it's survival. Maybe. But it's also acceptance. Accepting that Sarah's gone and life keeps moving whether I want it to or not." Wade stepped closer. "You asked me once if I was drowning. I was. But somewhere between the fire and Mercer's arrest and you showing up on my doorstep half dead and too stubborn to quit, I think I finally came up for air." Lena's throat tightened. "Wade, let me finish, please." He took her hands in his, carefully, like he was still learning how to touch someone without breaking them. "I don't know what the future looks like. Don't know if I'll ever stop missing Sarah or if I'll ever be the man I was before she died. But I know I want you in whatever comes next. If you'll stay." "Where else would I go?" "Anywhere. You're not trapped here anymore. We paid the debt. Mercer's in jail. You could leave tomorrow and find work in town or catch a train somewhere warmer or—" "Wade," Lena squeezed his hands. "I'm not staying because I'm trapped. I'm staying because I want to, because leaving would hurt more than staying ever could." Wade pulled her close, burying his face in her hair, and they stood like that for a long time, holding each other in the half-finished barn while the lantern burned low and Montana wind rattled the new walls. Eventually, Wade spoke against her hair. "Marry me." Lena pulled back to look at him. "What?" "Marry me. Not now. Not until you're ready. Not until we've figured out what this is and whether it can last. But someday, When the ranch is rebuilt and Mercer's trial is over and we've had time to breathe. His eyes were serious. Marry me and help me turn this place into something that belongs to both of us, instead of just ghosts. Lena's heart hammered against her ribs. 3 months ago, she'd been starving in a Pennsylvania winter with nowhere to go and nothing to hope for. Now she was standing in a Montana barn, being asked to build a future with a man who'd been dead inside until recently. It should have felt impossible. Instead, it felt inevitable. "Ask me again in spring," she said, "when the snow melts and we can see what we're really working with." Wade smiled, an actual smile that reached his eyes for the first time since Lena had known him. "That's not a no. It's not a yes either. It's a maybe, which is better than I've given anyone else." Wade kissed her, and this time there was no guilt in it, no hesitation. Just two people who'd survived impossible things choosing to believe that survival might lead somewhere worth going. The trial came in early March. Mercer's lawyers tried everything: motions to dismiss, change of venue, suppressing evidence. But Davy's confession held. Walsh's testimony held. And one by one, other victims came forward with their own stories of intimidation and fraud. The trial lasted 3 weeks. Wade attended every day, sitting in the gallery with Lena beside him, watching justice move at its grinding pace. On the final day, after closing arguments and jury deliberation, the verdict came back. Guilty on all counts. The courtroom erupted. People cheered. Others wept. Mercer sat stone-faced while his lawyers frantically requested appeals that everyone knew wouldn't change anything. Outside, Wade stood on the courthouse steps looking at the valley spread out below. "It's really over." Lena took his hand. "It's really over." They rode back to Iron Creek in silence, both too exhausted for celebration. But when they arrived, they found the ranch transformed. While they'd been at trial, the neighboring ranchers had organized a work party. The barn was finished, completely finished, with fresh paint and new stalls and a weather vane on top that definitely hadn't been there that morning. Ellie stood in the yard, grinning so hard her face must have hurt. "Surprise!" Wade just stared. Then, to everyone's shock, he started crying. Not quietly, not dignified. Full-on breaking down in front of 20 people who'd spent months thinking he was made of stone. The ranchers looked uncomfortable. Jack shifted his weight. Thomas studied his boots. But Ellie ran to her brother and wrapped her arms around him while he sobbed into her shoulder like a man finally letting go of 2 years' worth of grief, all at once. Lena stood back, giving them space, her own eyes burning. Eventually, Wade pulled himself together enough to thank everyone. His voice was rough, and his eyes were red, but he shook every hand and accepted every congratulations with something approaching grace. After everyone left and the sun was setting, Wade found Lena in the kitchen. "Thank you. I didn't do anything. The ranchers built the barn. Not for that. For being here. For seeing me fall apart and not looking away." He paused. "Sarah used to say that you can't really love someone until you've seen them at their worst and chosen to stay anyway. I never understood what she meant until today. Today wasn't your worst. I've seen you worse. Somehow that makes it better." They stood in comfortable silence, washing dishes side by side like they'd done 100 times before. Outside, spring was finally starting to show itself. Snow melting in patches, ice breaking up in the creek. The first hints of green pushing through frozen ground. "You know what I realized today?" Wade said. "What?" "I spent 2 years trying to keep everything exactly the way it was when Sarah died. Her room, her things, even the ranch. I was so focused on preserving what we'd built together that I stopped building anything new." He dried a plate carefully. "And then you showed up, and everything went to hell, and we lost the barn and nearly lost everything else. And I thought that was the worst thing that could happen. But it wasn't? No, because losing everything forced me to rebuild, and rebuilding meant letting go of how things were and accepting how things are." Wade set the plate down and turned to face her. "Sarah's gone. The old barn's gone. The man I was before she died is gone too. But I'm still here, and you're here, and that's enough to build something new." Lena understood what he was saying without him having to spell it out. He was choosing life over memory, present over past, her over Sarah's ghost, not replacing Sarah. Nobody could do that. But making room for something different alongside the love he'd lost. "Spring's coming," Lena said. You promised to ask me something when spring came. Wade smiled. I did, didn't it? So? He pulled her close, his hands settling at her waist like they belonged there. Lena Holloway, will you marry me and help me figure out what the hell we're doing with the rest of our lives? It was the least romantic proposal Lena had ever imagined. It was also the most honest. Yes. Wade kissed her, and somewhere in the next room, Ellie squealed loud enough to wake the dead. They married in May when the valley was finally green again, and wildflowers covered the hills in colors that had been buried under snow for months. It wasn't a big wedding, just Ellie and the ranch hands and the neighboring families who'd helped rebuild. The town preacher said words that Lena barely heard because she was too focused on Wade's face, on the way he looked at her like she was the answer to a question he'd stopped asking years ago. Ellie cried through the entire ceremony. Even Jack got misty-eyed, though he'd never admit it. When the preacher pronounced them married and Wade kissed her, the whole valley seemed to exhale with relief. The reception was held in the newly finished barn, the space decorated with wildflowers and lanterns, tables loaded with food that everyone had contributed, music from a fiddle player who'd traveled from 3 counties over. Late in the evening, when most people had gone home and the remaining guests were deep in their whiskey, Wade found Lena standing outside looking at stars. You okay? I'm married to you. I'm better than okay. Wade wrapped his arms around her from behind, his chin resting on her head. What are you thinking about? My father, wishing he could have been here. Lena's voice stayed steady, but Wade felt her tense slightly. He would have liked you, would have approved of all this. Tell me about him, not the factory or the fire, just him. So Lena did. She told Wade about her father's terrible singing voice and his habit of telling the same stories over and over, about how he'd sneak her candy when they could barely afford food, about his hands, scarred from years of factory work but gentle when he'd brush her hair. Wade listened without interrupting, just holding her while she remembered someone who'd been gone long enough that the memories were starting to blur at the edges. He sounds like he was a good man. He was. Not perfect. He drank too much sometimes and he had a temper. But he loved me, and he tried. That's more than a lot of people get. You think he'd be proud of what you've done? Coming out here, surviving everything, marrying a grumpy rancher twice your age? You're not twice my age. You're 15 years older. There's a difference. That's what you're focusing on? Lena turned in his arms to face him. I think he'd be proud that I didn't give up, that I kept walking even when I wanted to lie down and die, that I found a place where I matter. She touched his face. Yeah, I think he'd be proud. Wade kissed her forehead. I'm proud of you too, for what it's worth. It's worth a lot. They stood in the darkness, listening to music drift from the barn, watching stars wheel overhead. What happens now? Lena asked. Now we live. We run this ranch. We fight about stupid things and make up and fight again. We survive winters and celebrate springs and probably drive each other crazy. Wade smiled. Normal things. Boring things. The kind of life that doesn't make for interesting stories. Sounds perfect. Yeah, it does. They went back inside where Ellie was dancing with Ray, both of them laughing. Jack and Thomas were arm wrestling in the corner while other ranchers placed bets. The fiddle player had switched to a faster song that had everyone clapping along. Wade held out his hand. Dance with me? I don't know how. Neither do I. We'll figure it out. So they danced, badly, awkwardly, stepping on each other's feet and laughing about it. And somewhere in the middle of that terrible dancing, Lena realized something. She was happy, not just content or grateful or relieved, actually happy. For the first time since her father died, maybe for the first time in her entire life, Lena felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. It wouldn't last forever. Nothing did. There would be hard winters and failed crops and arguments that cut deep. Money problems and sick animals and all the thousand small disasters that made up a life. But right now, in this moment, dancing badly with a man who'd learned to love again despite every reason not to, surrounded by people who'd become something like family, it was enough, more than enough. It was everything. Years later, people would still tell the story of the winter the starving girl walked out of a blizzard and changed Iron Creek Ranch forever. They'd talk about how she'd run into a burning barn to save a child, how she'd stood up to Mercer's threats, how she'd convinced Wade Coulter, the bear of Iron Creek, the man everyone feared, to start living again. But the real story was simpler than that. It was about a girl who refused to quit even when quitting would have been easier. About a man who learned that honoring the dead meant living for the living. About two broken people who found each other in the worst possible circumstances and decided that broken things could still build something whole if they tried hard enough. The ranch thrived under their partnership. Wade handled the cattle and the heavy labor. Lena managed the house and the accounts and somehow convinced neighboring ranches to start cooperating instead of competing. Ellie grew into a young woman who knew her own mind, eventually marrying a schoolteacher from Billings and moving to town. She visited every Sunday, bringing books for Lena and gossip for Wade. The ranch hands stayed on, even Jack, who never quite lost his attitude but who'd walk through fire for either of them by the end. Mercer served 12 years in territorial prison before dying of pneumonia. His empire collapsed within months of his conviction, parceled out to creditors and former victims. The bank that had tried to foreclose was investigated for fraud and eventually shut down by federal authorities. Fletcher, the manager, served 5 years for bribery. And through it all, Iron Creek Ranch stood, rebuilt, reimagined, proof that survival was sometimes the bravest thing you could do. On their 5th anniversary, Wade took Lena back to the spot where she'd first arrived, that fence line where the freight wagon had dropped her in the snow. "What are we doing here?" Lena asked. "Remembering." "Remembering what?" Wade looked at the road stretching away toward town, then back at Lena. "Remembering what it felt like when I opened the door and saw this half-frozen girl who was too stubborn to die. Remembering thinking she wouldn't last a week." He smiled. "Remembering being completely wrong." Lena leaned against him, fitting perfectly under his arm the way she always did. "You weren't completely wrong. I almost didn't last a week. But you did. You lasted a week, and a month, and a winter, and everything that came after." Wade's voice got serious. "You know what Sarah used to say about love?" "What?" "That real love isn't about finding someone perfect. It's about finding someone whose damage fits your damage in a way that makes you both stronger." He paused. "I didn't understand that until I realized that Sarah wasn't preparing me for a life without her. She was preparing me to recognize the right person when they showed up." Lena felt tears start. "You think she'd approve? Of us?" "I think she'd be happy I finally kept my promise, the one about keep living." They stood in silence, watching the valley spread out before them, green now, alive, nothing like the frozen wasteland it had been when Lena arrived. "Thank you," Lena said quietly. "For what?" "For opening the door, for letting me stay, for not giving up even when giving up would have been easier." She looked up at him. "For choosing life." Wade kissed the top of her head. "Thank you for making life worth choosing." They walked back to the ranch as afternoon light turned golden across the fields. Smoke rose from the chimney where dinner was cooking. Horses grazed in the north pasture. Everything was exactly as it should be. That night, lying in bed with Wade's arm around her and the house quiet around them, Lena thought about her father. She hoped he was proud, wherever he was. Hoped he knew she'd survived. Hoped he understood that sometimes the bravest thing you could do was just keep walking, even when you had no idea where you were going. Because courage wasn't about being fearless. It was about being afraid and continuing anyway. It was about losing everything and choosing to build something new from the wreckage. It was about looking at impossible odds and deciding that impossible just meant harder, not undoable. The people who survived weren't the strongest or the smartest or the luckiest. They were the ones who refused to stop, who got knocked down and stood back up, who walked through blizzards with torn boots and ran into burning barns and fought battles they had no business winning. Lena had walked out of a Pennsylvania winter with nothing but a suitcase and a photograph. She'd survived starvation and cold and threats and fire. She'd faced down men who thought her size made her weak. She'd loved a man everyone said was too broken to fix. And somehow, impossibly, she'd won. Not because she was special, not because she was chosen, but because when the world gave her every reason to quit, she'd looked at those reasons and said, "Not yet. Not today. Not ever." And in the end, that stubbornness, that refusal to accept defeat even when defeat seemed inevitable, had made all the difference. Spring came every year to Iron Creek Ranch. Snow melted. Flowers bloomed. Life continued. And in the ranch house that had once been a tomb for grief, two people who'd survived impossible things built a life that proved survival was just the beginning. The real victory wasn't staying alive. It was learning to live.